Hey, it's KR from D&D Homebrew talking today about whether you should and how you should retcon the events and personages and lore of your world. And retconning basically means it's usually a book or movie in which there is a sequel or another book set in the same setting, and the author goes back to the first book and changes events and facts to reflect something in the new book or movie. The most famous in fantasy is Lord of the Rings, in which Tolkien went back into The Hobbit and retconned the scene with Gollum and Bilbo finding the ring. Because in The Lord of the Rings, he made the ring this super powerful item, the whole focus of the book. It's evil and malevolent. And so in the original book, it's just an invisibility ring. And when Bilbo wins the riddle thing, Gollum just gives it to him without a thought. Well, when he realized the power of it, its malevolence, that this would be Gollum's precious, he changes this. Bilbo is more trickery, this whole riddle thing. Gollum is going to have sinister designs, and when he loses the ring, he's enraged. He's lost his precious, right? And the malevolence, Bilbo lies in The Hobbit, which he didn't do in the first edition, to Gandalf and stuff about it because of this malevolent power of the ring. And there's retconning, the famous retconning, let's see, in the Terminator, the first movie, it's clear that this has occurred, the aliens taking over, the Earth, destroying humanity, and the alien has come back to kill John Connor's mother to stop the resistance. But in the second movie, it's implied that this takeover by Skynet could be avoided. That's a retcon because that was never suggested in the first film. Now, what happened in Terminator, time travel is very much related to something that I say you can never retcon in an RPG setting, which is events that have occurred with the player's involvement. If the players do anything in your world, it must stay the same. All the activities that you and the players are engaged in as part of the game process, you don't ever want to change. Because events occur one time. All the people that go back in Terminator, the first Terminator comes and he fails to kill Sarah Connor. The second Terminator comes to save him. There's, the evil one and the good one. All that stuff just happens in the world and goes along. None of that is changing. You can't change everyone who appears. So they failed. That's the way it works. And so in your game, you never want to change, try to, maybe it seems ludicrous anyway, but just remember, you can't change anything that has occurred with the players. And another retcon in the Star Wars, let's see, The Last Jedi, Rey in that is just this nobody living on this, planet sort of mirroring Luke Skywalker. And then in a later version, she's suddenly granddaughter of the Emperor. They've retconned her parentage. And that you could possibly get away with in a D&D setting if you had made it obvious that she was hiding something or whatever. But again, if you clearly show parents and, she has this whole life or this NPC, let's say, and then suddenly you reveal that they're the secret granddaughter of the emperor or something, that gets into that borderline area of retconning. Now, that does relate to what you can do with retconning. I wouldn't call it retconning per se. So, for instance, lore expansion. As the players go through the world and as you're thinking about things and developing encounters and whatnot, you can add these encounters into the lore of your world. You're expanding this, deepening it, and you're making places and personages that you've created. You're connecting them to the lore that the players already know about. So that someone that they meet, let's say a Rey type figure, as it turns out, you hadn't even thought of their parentage or whatever. As it turns out, you've decided they're related to someone that's important or that has a significant thing in your world. And that deepens the narrative connections, that deepens the relationships between these NPCs. But you haven't ever established this beforehand. You're not violating anything that has occurred in the world up to this point. And this relates to the easiest, expansion or contextual integration, whatever you want to call this, instead of retconning. I'm just going to say, though, retconning, that's not traditional, is NPCs are very easy to retcon. The players meet them. One of the things is with NPCs is that you never know who the players are going to respond to. You never know who they're going to, connect with and want to deal with. I always set up Zodi, the barkeep, as my first contact. When the players often ignore that in my Pathfinder world, they like Wesgar, this guy that lives up in this gambling town. So I expand upon Wesgar. I start to create connections that he has. What's his relationship to the city? The father's in the big city, and then they have this small gambling town and all this stuff because the players are interested. I haven't done that. So I'm not necessarily retconning, but I'm thinking about it. If I'm creating NPCs as the players go, because again, I'm not trying to create the whole world at once. I'm creating NPCs as the players explore my world. Now I have to decide what the relationships are there. Now, one of the things you want to be important when you're doing this, you're expanding this NPC's backstory and whatnot, is you don't want to make it like such the players can see this, because what they'll do is they'll say things like, "Oh, is that someone's sister?" And they'll look at you. "Is that someone's brother? Is that her, his father?" And they'll do this stuff because they can see you kind of creating this on the fly. If they do that, say, "Oh, no. Unless you have a real cooperative storytelling kind of game, then you can absolutely do that if you're creating the story together. But in a traditional D&D game where you're the GM and you're creating everything, you just do not do that, because then they'll try to manipulate. I just know how players are. Even the most fair-minded, innocent, they'll start to do that. Just say, "Oh, no, that's not what it is," and make it something else. Make it, you're not trying to, pretend like I had this all planned for, years before this or something like that. You're just trying to negate any sense that they have any influence on this or whatever. It's the way they want it to be. Because, in fact, it'll be better for them to enjoy the story as it unfolds if it hasn't, they have no idea what this is going to be. So NPCs, you establish them, this barkeep in this town, the players start going there. Well, then what's their background? What's going on? And you can retcon that to something that the person they've met, maybe they know something about a situation the players have been in. They were in the army, let's say, and then they know about this battle that the players encountered a battlefield or artifacts or something like that, especially a long-lived race like an elf or something, or dwarf. So you can retcon and bring in an eyewitness to this to give more information. If it makes sense, and you got to go through and think about, could this NPC have this connection? But that's a really good way to make that personal, to make it make sense that the players would be able to get this information. So when it comes to places and events of your world, you are really integrating these into this backstory, into the lore, into the history of your world. You've created a jungle temple as a one-shot. You drew this up, and you just thought, I'm going to put some stuff here. The players are going to stumble across it. Well, is there a way to integrate this into other stories that the players are aware of? So, again, you're not changing any of the facts of, so let's say the players had discovered the remnants of some cult, and you've got this jungle temple. Well, and you've already created it. Well, the obvious thing is just to connect that and say, that's this cult, this was one of their temples. But you can be more creative. You can say that this cult actually found artifacts from this temple and connect it that way, where they find some artifacts, and you think to yourself, okay, this little, let's say, talisman, later on they're going to find something because they're really investigating this cult. It's kind of a major plot line of your world. So you place that there, and you create the thing, and you think, hey, I'm going to put a talisman there. I wasn't thinking of that when I was creating it. And that talisman will relate to something with the cult. It has some information. So that they go back to town and they meet up with, let's say they have a mentor in town, a wizard or someone, some powerful person who sees this talisman and tells them, oh, well, this, they do a lore check or something like that, or investigate. This relates to something somewhere else, which again can be a retcon, something you hadn't thought through, but you're connecting these and you're creating layers of complexity and integration here on the fly so that you don't have to do it all at once. Because Tolkien just came up with this great idea of this ring of power, and he wanted to connect it to his Hobbit story, which was just a children's story, kind of fanciful and not so scary. Oh, pretty scary. It would be scary today, but at that time it wasn't that scary. But he created it, and it was really scary in Lord of the Rings, right? So again, when you're creating this stuff, you can deepen that sense of menace and that sense of power by starting off with something in some place that's even a random monster encounter. That you just rolled up something and it's some trolls. And in the old days, we would roll for a lair or whatever. And decide to put something there that connects to something else. And you're retconning the trolls in a way. Again, see, it's not like a book or a movie where you've set it all down, you wrote it all out, and you're changing it. right, after the fact. You never want to do that kind of stuff. You're creating this world, but but it should be dynamic and it should be changing. And you're changing as the GM. You're thinking about the world. You're seeing where the players go. And you're taking ideas that you have and you're connecting them to NPCs. You're connecting them potentially to places. And then the final thing is the events of your world. So remember, anything the players were involved with, anything that they saw should be the same. The events of the past, if there is some murkiness there. Remember, in the second one, Bilbo lies about the ring. Well, in a player situation, they wouldn't know if you had this NPC Bilbo, if he's lying about how he got this ring. First, he says one thing, and that's just a fact, and then you decide, man, I'm going to change that up. Well, if the players didn't witness that, you could make that a lie and make it something else. This is the real story behind it. This is the hidden alliances. This is an NPC that turns out to be working for the enemy. Be careful about that too much because the players can feel betrayed. But the events of the world as it's presented to the players. There was a great war, and all the cities aligned themselves against this evil city and destroyed it. And then as the players come along, they realize, that city wasn't necessarily evil. They just they worshipped a god that these other societies didn't like. So that when the players first hear about the events of your world, if you've got some other storyline ideas, you can make that history unreliable. Because, of course, history, even today, is somewhat unreliable. Well, think back in sort of a pre-industrial world where books are written by hand and stories are passed down from one to the other. These change, these become legend, they become myth. And as you're getting ideas and you're creating storylines and stuff, you can reshape and have that history be not correct. You can redraw, or rethink that history based on what the players are doing. And they're the ones discovering the real story. Nothing is more fun. This is why conspiracy theories are so popular among people who often feel powerless. They know the true story about how things are. And that gives them that sense of power. Well, this is a situation where the players really do discover something that you've retconned about the world. You set out this story initially, and as you're going along and as you're thinking about things and creating things, you go, hey, I've got a better idea on this. So I'm going to change the way these events really transpire. So, and again, because I had told this story of this guy discovering this ring or something, and it was just kind of a minor ring, and then you get this idea of this evil ring, and you go, hey, wait a minute. What if that's the ring? That's the evil ring that this guy found in this cave. And that guy went off to the Shire type thing, and where did it go? And the players go there to try to find it. Right? I'm just using that as a template, but you can see where I'm going. I had this idea, this ring, and it was an invisibility ring. But in fact, it's this super powerful item. Because you've created that as you've gone through the world, as the players have, gone places and you are keeping up with them and creating things, because you're not trying to create this world all at once. And that's why the retconning is so powerful, because it allows you to create as you go along and to connect things in ways that are more interesting than if you try to do it all at once. So remember, never change the facts that the players are involved with. Never let them change it unless you're playing a narrative game where it's cooperative, then you can do that all you want. And try to do it in a way you're not undermining the logic of your world at all times, but you're using this to deepen the relationships of the NPCs with each other and the inner, connection or context of the stories themselves. And again, here's a shout out to my Patreon supporters. I just did this Isle of Doom for them, really fun. Talked about where we get our sources of inspiration. And again, if you like this video, like it, subscribe. Give me some examples of some retconning that you've done in your world. But most importantly, my friends, keep playing an RPG game, whichever one you choose, and tell somebody else about it.